I'd like to share the ground rules with you. This meeting is being recorded. Please put your name in the chat to the right of your screen so that we will know how many people attended. If you would like to be added to the FUSRAP email list, be sure to put your email address after your name. If you are a legislator or represent a legislator, please include your title. Because this meeting is virtual due to COVID-19 precautions, we have a few constraints in order to provide the best audio and video quality possible and to protect individual privacy. To preserve bandwidth and improve quality, please turn off your video. Only the St. Louis District Commander and FUSRAP subject matter experts should have video and be unmuted. If you can't remember the name of the person who is speaking, hover over or click the lowest part of the speaker's screen and the speaker's name will appear. A portion of the meeting has been set aside for questions and answers. Questions can be added to the chat at any time. During the question and answer session, I will read the question and the subject matter expert will provide information. Only ask general questions in the chat. To protect your privacy, this meeting uses private chat, that is, attendee to host only. Private chat isn't viewable by all the public, so that any personally identifiable information, or PII, inadvertently put in the chat will only be viewable by the host. We cannot answer questions about individual addresses in a virtual environment. Homeowners' questions about their properties will only be accepted via email through stlfusrap@usace.army.mil. That's stlfusrap@usace.army.mil, and will be answered sometime after this meeting. Please keep in mind that FUSRAP has a cleanup mission, not a medical mission. We don't have the expertise or the authority to address medical questions. Please maintain an atmosphere of respect. Now I'd like to cover the agenda. Our program will begin with a welcome from our commander, Colonel Kevin Gollinghorst. Phil Mosier will give us an overview of FUSRAP St. Louis sites in the Program Manager's Report. Project Manager Aubrey Glenn will provide the project status of the St. Louis downtown site. Phil Mosier will give the project status of the North St. Louis County site. After that, the question and answer session. The evening will end with closing remarks. If you joined us late, please put your name in the chat at the right of the screen so that we will know who is attending. If you would like to be added to the FUSRAP email list, be sure to put your email address after your name. If you are a legislator or represent a legislator, please add your title. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This event will end at 8 o'clock. In the near future, the FUSRAP team will post a question and answer document on the FUSRAP webpage. A Contact Us slide will be shown toward the end of this virtual FUSRAP open house. Here to say a few words is the commander of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, St. Louis District, Colonel Kevin Gollinghorst.
All right, I got the permissions there to unmute myself. Well, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. As introduced, my name is Kevin, and I'm so glad to be with you all night. As you see in the background, we've got a sign here that says the best place to work is the St. Louis District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We're really proud to serve here in the city, in the region, and really across the nation. But this focused topic tonight on FUSRAP is really important. And I'm really so thankful for the work that's been done already and the work that we're going to keep working on with the city and the state and our other federal partners. And so I'll just share that I joined this great unit about 1.5 years ago. And, you know, this is one of many of the programs that I wanted to really learn more about because I know that this region and the city was so important to our nation over 75 years ago. and as a nation at war during World War II. And as material was processed here in the region and moved around the region, in the last 2 decades, we've worked hard to get a handle and remediate and take care of bringing that material, getting it out of the city and out of the region. And so much work has already been done. Over 1.5 million cubic yards of contaminated material has been removed from sites, and over 400 plus properties have been, are turned over and are good for proper use by citizens and by the community. So the team's going to cover, as you see there, the agenda, several, overall update information about the downtown site, the North St. Louis by the airport, and Coldwater Creek, I know may be of interest to many of you. And so we're going to cover a lot of ground, and I would just highlight that we want to make sure that we cover this, but then also we'll stay and answer any questions you have, and also capture those questions and share it with others that are on, and maybe for the others that couldn't join us tonight. I want to thank the team that's going to cover the material for getting the work done and then highlighting it tonight. I want to thank our partners that may have joined as well. The Department of Energy ultimately turned over this mission to the Corps of Engineers, again, over 22 plus years ago. And a lot of work has been done. So we want to make sure we highlight that. We work with the EPA and other partners in the region. And we even recently had a chance to update our new Congresswoman Cori Bush, and some key staff to make sure she understood the work we're doing as well. So we're glad to be able to do that, and we'll continue that dialogue and updates to elected officials, but to you all as citizens as well. So thanks again. We look forward to the updates, your questions, and then any feedback that you have for us tonight. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Andrea and to Phil and others that will be briefing tonight. Thanks again.
Thank you, Colonel Gollinghorst. With an overview of the formerly utilized Sites Remedial Action Program, let me introduce the FUSRAP Program Manager, Phil Mosier.
That we provide this valuable information to the community. I know that everyone on the team, and not just our team, but in the St. Louis district, really wish we could have some sort of an in-person engagement. We were holding out for trying to have something this summer, but we're going ahead and having this via a virtual means so that we can make sure that we provide up-to-date information to everyone for not just the program management-wide, but also for the St. Louis sites, being the St. Louis downtown site and also the North County sites as well, for North County St. Louis sites as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into the presentation. Next slide. As Colonel was mentioning during his opening remarks, we wanted to make sure that we note of our partners that we work with on a normal basis, as well as having them on the line tonight. I know we have several representatives from EPA Region 7, as well as representatives from the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, Department of Energy Legacy Management, and also the ATSDR. Along with our use-based organization, our subject matter experts and PMs, we want to make sure that we note that partnership is alive and well with the other agencies in delivering our program, so that we can deliver the mission in a timely and efficient manner. Next slide. Just a general overview of what we have at the St. Louis sites. We want to make sure that everyone is aware of how much contaminated material we have shipped out over the years. So what you see here is through FY21. As a government organization, we often track things in fiscal years. So this fiscal year of fiscal year 2021, and you see the different sites there. For the most part, the majority of that is coming from the St. Louis Airport site or SLAP's Vicinity properties. And you see the correlation there as well to the number of rail cars. I thought that was interesting because you can kind of figure out, you can see the picture there of what a rail car is and the thousands of rail cars that we have shipped out from the area, from the St. Louis area, to an off-site licensed disposal facility over the years since we've been doing this program. And in FY22, we plan to have another great year. specifically, you see there at SLAP's Vicinity properties and also the St. Louis downtown site to get over, you know, if you just add that up, 33,500 cubic yards coming here in the next fiscal year. Next slide. The other metric we always strive to that we like to make sure that everyone's aware of, in addition to the cubic yard shipped, is the properties released for beneficial use. So now that's a term that we use to make sure that everyone is aware that as we come in and do some sampling on a property and do our investigation, as we go through the process, and maybe remediation is required, maybe not, but in a way to document that, to show that we are making progress at the site, we do some documentation paperwork in order to provide the radiological release of those areas so they can be released back to the property owner for beneficial use as they choose. So in 2021, in the fiscal year, for the North County site, you see 81 there and 2 for the downtown site. I want to make note of the progress that we have had to date in the properties released. Of course, the 52 down there at the downtown site and the 363 at the North St. Louis County site. Now, a lot of that is coming within the Vicinity properties areas inside the record of decision boundary for the North St. Louis County sites. But in addition to that, we have started releasing a lot of properties along the Coldwater Creek corridor and the adjacent properties along Coldwater Creek. So planned in 2022 for the downtown site and for the North St. Louis County sites, we have a total of 51, continuing to make that progress as we move down the creek, as we sample, and as we're able to evaluate those areas and provide that radiological release documentation. Next slide. Another thing that we wanted to make sure that we highlight is our impeccable safety measures that we take, as well as our, you'll see in a couple of slides, is our record in safety. So one thing, not just all of the sites we have in St. Louis, but we also have other sites that we have some environmental work going on as far as our safety measures to protect public and workers. So anytime that we're doing a remediation where we are required to go and actually do any type of digging, we want to make sure that we establish the restricted area around that work and using fencing and other controls to prevent the unauthorized access into those areas with those appropriate warning signs and barricades to make sure that we distinguish any of those areas that come along that are potentially accessible to the public. In addition to just those barriers and signs, we conduct air monitoring continuously at all times during those working hours when we have workers present. And to date, I will say, you know, without a doubt, we have not seen any type of release offsite of any of those air monitoring stations as we continuously monitor in those areas where we need to. And as far as that, in addition to that, not just the monitoring, but to prevent any of that potential dust from happening, we want to make sure that we keep that area wet and spraying it with water, and also our loadout piles that we have here at the St. Louis Airport site, where we have our contractors and also core personnel on site in our loadout area to make sure that that area is sufficiently wet or compacted, and also minimizing the height of the soil as it is dropped out of the dump truck into the area and dropped from the excavator into the bed of the actual rail car. And in addition to that, as we are doing remediation, we make sure that the trucks are covered with a tarp prior to leaving the remediation area and transporting it. Next slide. Continuing on with that theme of safety measures, so this is when we were talking about the loadout area and some of the measures we take for monitoring, but also at the site where we are doing the digging. We make sure that the technicians on site and trained personnel on site are visually inspecting to make sure that there is no soil, sediment, or debris that is there. If necessary, they will definitely decontaminate that and remove it from the truck or whatever needs to happen prior to actually moving on. And also they do, we have health physics technicians that do a radiological survey of that area prior to leaving it, so that when the truck is on the haul route, we can verify that that there is no contamination on the truck as it proceeds to the loadout area. In addition to the truck itself, we have the haul routes that we make sure that as a daily activity when in use, those are radiologically surveyed. And next slide. as I alluded to earlier in that safety record, as far as being impeccable, and you see our contractors there, and since 1999, working over 1.7 million man hours and only one lost time accident for our lab analysis contractors, and then our remedial action contractors amass more than 4.3 million man hours of effort and only 4 lost time accidents. So one of the things there is you see in conjunction, we have on site, we have laboratory analysis and remedial action working as a team with USACE to make sure that the mission gets delivered, and it has been an extremely safe mission throughout the longevity of the project. Next slide. As far as our program needs and what we're looking at, we always get that question, well, what else could you guys do? What else could you need? One of the specific things that we wanted to mention here is our access to properties. We have had great coordination and cooperation with a lot of the property owners, specifically down Coldwater Creek. I know it can be cumbersome to allow someone to come in and sample the property and potentially do remediation, but you know what? It is all in the best interest of both parties, not just the government, but anybody who is involved in the process as well. And I did want to thank anybody that's there that has been able to grant us access and that right of entry to come in and do that sampling in order for us to do that evaluation of that property. So that cooperation from the residents is very critical to the work actually being completed, so that we can continue on the mission and delivering the program for this area, which is very, very, very at the heart of what I do as a program manager, and I know everybody on the team has that same aspect that we want to make sure that we deliver on this mission for the St. Louis area. Next. So that kind of sums up the program manager's report. We wanted to make sure, and if you did have questions, to make sure that you post those in the chat. Andrea is going to be monitoring the chat as the host, so we can compile those into our question and answer session at the end. And now next is going to be our next participant, which is going to be Aubrey Glenn, our project manager for the St. Louis downtown site. So I'm going to turn it over to her to give you guys some more specifics of that site that we have going on in St. Louis downtown.
Thanks, Phil. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aubrey Glenn, and I'm the project manager for the FUSRAP St. Louis downtown site, or SLID. SLID is 210 acres along I-70. The boundary is shown here in red. SLID is really centered around the Mallinckrodt manufacturing complex. That's when Mallinckrodt had a contract with the Manhattan Engineer District to process uranium ores. Outside of this manufacturing center is about 165 acres of adjacent properties owned by various government entities and businesses. Just wanted to highlight that SLID is a highly industrialized area. You can see the railroad runs up and down the entire site. There's various manufacturing plants, many waste and recycling businesses. So SLID is very industrial. Like a lot of FUSRAP sites, the primary contaminants of concern at SLID are radiological, uranium, thorium, radium. We're also dealing with arsenic and cadmium. Currently, there are 2 operable units at SLID. The first is the accessible soils and groundwater operable unit. In 1998, a record of decision required us to excavate contaminated soil and dispose it off-site. We also do groundwater monitoring to ensure that our remedial activities are not adversely affecting the groundwater underneath. The second operable unit at SLID addresses inaccessible soils, those soils that are potentially contaminated but are difficult to get to. Perhaps they're underneath buildings, underneath railways. We did investigate a group of these inaccessible soils, what we're calling Group 1 inaccessible soil properties. And in 2014, developed a record of decision, and it found that a no further action remedy was protective of human health and the environment. So just stepping back, SLID as a whole, it really is pretty advanced in remediation. Probably 90% of the site has been investigated and remediated when necessary, just as addressed in these 2 records of decisions. Where we're at now is focusing on what we're calling Group 2 inaccessible soil areas. Those are what remains to be investigated. So just in terms of, status of the slids cleanup, to date, we've removed over 332,000 cubic yards of contaminated soil from slids, and we've released 52 properties back to the community for beneficial use. We estimate that there's about 18 to 20 remaining sites that we still have to address. So again, it's pretty well on its way towards closure. Just kind of the remaining areas are difficult to get to, and I'll show you some of those pictures later on. Checking back on our completed work this last fiscal year in 2021, we shipped 4,500 cubic yards of contaminated soil. That's shipped to a federally licensed landfill that can take in low-level radiologically contaminated soil. We released 2 properties, one a former building within the Mountain Crop Manufacturing Complex, and then the second one along the levee. We also focused our remedial action at Gunther Salt North. There's a former building there, and then one of its domes. We also continue to investigate and do investigative sampling. Last fiscal year, we covered 4 areas. We'll see the results of those sampling this year. And then the last bullet, I just wanted to mention, sort of to ride on Phil's safety topic, we completed 3 utility support events in fiscal year 2021. These events take place when a property owner within the SLID's boundary or a utility company has plans to disturb soil within SLIDs. Our folks, we have a team that go out there that do air monitoring. Perhaps we'll take a soil sample, and we do this to ensure the radiological safety and protection of the utility personnel. At times we might provide, PPE, personal protective equipment, manage any contaminated soils that we encounter. Again, this is a critical part of us ensuring the safety of the public, and in this case, utility personnel. So just to show you some pictures of remediation fiscal year 2021, again, just wanted to emphasize, at SLIDs, we're looking at doing remediation in tight spaces. You can see here, this is within one of the Gunther Salt domes. We've had to implement innovative engineering practices to ensure the structural integrity of some of these buildings that we're excavating contaminated soil from. But that talks to the tight spaces and the kind of remediation that we're having to do at SLID. Looking ahead to FY 2022 and beyond, we'll continue to evaluate areas with previously inaccessible soils to determine the presence and level of soil contamination. In particular, we're looking at 2 rail spur areas within SLID. We'll continue to remediate areas as required by the 1998 Record of Decision. We'll continue groundwater monitoring. We have a network of wells in SLIDs that we monitor quarterly. We sample those, share the sampling results with our regulatory partners, and those are available online if you're interested in seeing those results. We'll continue to provide utility support, like I mentioned in the last slide. Currently, we estimate remedy complete at SLIDs to be complete in FY 2029. That's in large part because we expect several buildings to be demolished in the coming years. With building demolition, that will expose hopefully some soils that we previously considered inaccessible. And then, and then the last bullet here, the end goal is, of course, to transfer the stewardship responsibility to the Department of Energy, back to the Department of Energy. In terms of project challenges and needs, I mentioned SLIDs, we're focusing on accessing previously inaccessible soils, and they're sometimes in tight spaces. So remediation has taken more time probably than at other sites. It's costing more, but we feel the best strategy is to access as much of the contaminated soil as possible versus putting land use controls in place. In terms of needs, we just wanted to encourage our commercial partners within SLIDs to continue to give us access to the properties. We do this through the right of entry agreements. The more timely we get these agreements in place, we're able to sample and remediate soil contamination in a more timely manner. That's my update on SLIDs. Again, if you had any questions on the St. Louis downtown site, I'd encourage you to please type that in the chat on the right-hand side. And with that, I'd like to transfer it back to Phil to cover the North St. Louis County site.
All right, thanks, Aubrey. Unfortunately, my project manager, Joanne Wade, could not be here with us tonight, so I will be giving the update for the FUSRAP North St. Louis County site. So with that, we wanted to point out some of the pictures that we have here, of course, on the North St. Louis County site. So we have, of course, the map that shows the St. Louis Airport site vicinity properties there and the rod boundary, and then, of course, we have it mapped out there for Coldwater Creek that extends all the way to the Missouri River, and some sampling that goes on a daily basis out there. And great work, and kudos to the crew to make sure to as far as their efforts and getting actually in there and creek. And anybody that has seen it and anybody that we've taken out there on tours understands the complexity that which is presented by going down there and sampling the creek. And some of the things that we've highlighted as well, as far as the pictures there, are the continuous work that we have going on. There on the left is actually Pershaw Road, where they did the bridge replacement, and then there on the right is that continuing type work that we have going on the I-270 area as well. Next slide. So a general overview, North St. Louis County sites, you see the zoomed in picture there of the record of decision boundary. And when we moved down, we wanted to make sure that as far as the general overview and highlighting that the North St. Louis County sites, one record of decision, which includes the St. Louis Airport site, Laddie Avenue properties, and also the St. Louis Airport site vicinity properties. There, and of course, you have the numbers there associated with each one, Laddie containing the Hazelwood Interim Storage Site and Futura Coatings, and also 10 Laddie vicinity properties. And then drilling down to the specifics of the last VPs, 148 vicinity properties south of Pershaw Road, and in the original record of decision, the Coldwater Creek was included as one vicinity property. And as we have started doing more sampling and identified more areas in Coldwater Creek, as far as the vicinity properties, we have around 700 vicinity properties north of Pershaw Road within the 10-year floodplain extending to the Missouri River of Coldwater Creek. Next slide. Project scope for the North St. Louis County sites, as with any of our FUSRAP sites that we manage here in St. Louis, is protecting human health and the environment. And as far as the North St. Louis County sites, maintaining what we have within our authority within that record of decision, and also minimizing the adverse effects on area businesses and property owners. We want to make sure that as we move down and do our work, that we are able to do as much as possible within the allotted amount of time. We have worked diligently with some of the individual property owners, specifically like right here on Coldwater Creek, in order to make sure that we can get in and do some sampling if need be and clear an area. And then if we need to remove contamination, as highlighted in the Pershaw Bridge replacement and the I-270 area, getting in there and actually removing contamination when that area is being made available to us. Next slide. I kind of alluded to it earlier in the significant challenges that we have in the North St. Louis County sites, remediating those contaminated soils. And the North St. Louis County sites is enormous. So as far as the area that we manage on a daily basis throughout our work, not just from our contractors that are doing sampling, but contractors that are doing remediation as well, is there are several different types of areas: industrial, commercial, recreational, residential, that we want to make sure that each location can be different, and we want to make sure we tailor that approach to each individual owner, if it's a property, or each individual representative of that area, if it's something that is recreational or an area around there. Additionally, just want to highlight, there are 14.2 miles of Coldwater Creek that is within our record of decision boundary that extend from the St. Louis Airport site all the way to the Missouri River. And there's a lot of challenges associated with that 14.2 miles. One of the things that we highlighted earlier about the I-270 and the remediating the potential of the inaccessible soils around there, and we're doing some more extensive investigation around haul roads and railroads to make sure that if there is any places out there that we can get some of this contamination that would otherwise be inaccessible, we want to make sure that we can go in there and take that out now, so that we can make sure that it is a much better situation at the end of the day. And as highlighted earlier in the program manager's review, and then also as talked about with Aubrey, as far as getting those rights of entries from property owners along Coldwater Creek. Once again, I do want to thank everybody that has provided that access to us and that right of entry, and moving forward, we hope to get that cooperation from everyone that we have along the creek. At the St. Louis Airport site, just wanted to highlight there that St. Louis Airport site, we did remove a lot of contamination there, over 600 cubic yards removed to an off-site disposal facility. That is one of the source locations for the contamination in Coldwater Creek. So the big picture there is, so everyone is on the same page, is that contamination is removed, it is gone. What we are dealing with now is residual contamination from that portion of St. Louis Airport site. As far as, we did move our field office. So if anyone was familiar, we did used to reside on Laddie Avenue. A lot of our project managers, our technical team, as well as our laboratory was right there on 8945 Laddie Avenue. We have since moved to site here on St. Louis Airport site and kind of decommissioned that area over there on Laddie Avenue, so that we are all located here in one spot at the St. Louis Airport site. The site is complete, but we still do environmental monitoring here, and we will continue that until we actually get to the closeout stage. This is also where our loadout facility is located. And as I mentioned earlier, as far as the safety measures, those continue at our loadout facility right here at the St. Louis Airport site. Next slide. The other portion of North County St. Louis sites, Laddie Avenue properties, another site that has been remediated. As far as the over 200,000 cubic yards of contaminated material that went off site, you can see in the picture there the old storage piles that did used to be there at the Hazelwood interim storage site, right there. Those piles are gone, and once again, contamination that could have potentially migrated its way into Coldwater Creek came from there as well, and those sites are gone, and we're dealing with a residual contamination from that as well. We've been doing some additional work on the Laddie Avenue properties and trying to get some documentation in place so that if things work out, we can actually transfer that area over to the Department of Energy Legacy Management. And in conjunction with that, with many of the areas that are under our purview here at the St. Louis sites, we want to make sure to get as much of that potentially inaccessible contamination as possible, so that moving forward is if we do have to leave something behind, it's a much easier area to manage for the Department of Energy Legacy Management. Next slide. Now on to the St. Louis Airport site vicinity properties, where the majority of the work happens nowadays for our North County St. Louis sites. We're continuing ongoing doing remediation and shipping that up to out-of-state licensed disposal facility where we're up over 180,000 cubic yards coming from the St. Louis Airport site vicinity properties specifically. The other things to highlight on there are that I kind of talked about earlier in the overview, in that the properties that we have been able to release, to provide that radiological release documentation to hand over to the property owners, so they have that in their hands moving forward. The sampling that we have done on Coldwater Creek, with the challenges associated with that, we've completed 9.6 of that 14.2 miles of Coldwater Creek, and we have continued that progress throughout the years. We've been able to actually try to increase that production. One of the things that helped us out with that is our move over here to the St. Louis Airport site. We were able to upgrade our laboratory to help out with that capacity to actually move through samples. In addition to that, we've charged some of the crew with actually increasing the crew size to try to get as much sampling done as possible in an expeditious manner. And one of the things associated with that is these access agreements. Keep harping on that, is making sure, thanking everyone that has provided that up to this point, but we want to make sure that cooperation is throughout the whole part of the creek moving forward as we continue down to the Missouri River. We are still remediating at the ball fields, the area right over there, and that contamination. The challenge of that is there's some clean soil that is on top of the contaminated soil, so that has to be removed and set off to the side prior to us actually going in and releasing and removing some of that contaminated material. But that process is ongoing, and it has been for quite some time now. Mentioned earlier about our coordination with MoDOT. So that MoDOT has been a great partner. Can't say enough about MoDOT and our coordination with them and our ability for our technical team members to actually just sit down and figure out what is the best time for us to come in and do what we need to do. Doing what we need to do means actually taking those samples and going in and actually removing that contamination when we are presented that opportunity. You see the number there, 35,000 cubic yards of contaminated material that we were able to get in with that coordination with MoDOT and actually remove that. Otherwise, that would have been inaccessible, and we would not have been able to access that at all. But that specific coordination that we had was paramount to actually getting in there and getting that work done. Next slide. Continuing on with that is that we are still continuing to work with the Department of Transportation and trying to continue that work that we did for Shaw Road and move that into I-270 and getting as much as possible of that inaccessible soils and moving out of there. I know we have some legacy management personnel on the line, and I know that they are thrilled with that as far as the ability for us to remove as much of that as possible so that if down the road, if we do have to leave anything behind, that it is much easier to manage for them in perpetuity. So, and we're also working with the St. Louis County on McDonald Bridge, right out here outside of our offices, where Coldwater Creek kind of starts its laps here as far as what's in our authority. And there at the McDonald Bridge, we know that there's contamination there, and we're working with the St. Louis County to make sure that we have the potential to get in there as well, so that when they do the road improvements, we can get in there and remove some of that inaccessible contamination as it becomes accessible for us. One other thing is right there on First Shaw Road, there's a property we call BP 56, but you see the actual numbers there, 8930 and 8940 First Shaw Roads, and we were able to get in there, do some sampling, and remove some of that contamination so that the property owner could easily erect a new building on that property without having to go through the controls and rigors that we would normally have with our area of actually going in there and providing radiological support. Next slide. Now we just wanted to throw up some pictures there and highlight some of the great work that's being done by our team. Once again, our team is not just USACE, it includes everyone, all the other government agencies that we work with, our partners, and our contractors as well, that are out there doing the great work in our field. So some significant progress happening there, right there on the area, I will just call it for Shaw I-270 area right there. You see some of the pictures from that at the ball fields, of course, and then the sampling that we've been able to do on McDonald Boulevard Bridge, right there next to the bridge, rather, and then the I-270 work, and then the work at right there on Shaw Road as well. Next slide. Another thing we want to highlight as far as what we are doing, I alluded to it earlier and kind of talking about some of the areas that we're trying to address. One of those areas is making sure that we can get as much of that inaccessible contamination as possible and addressing the haul roads as much as possible as well. So the original record of decision boundary is highlighted there in green. And what we are doing with our explanation of significant differences to the ROD is kind of expanding that boundary a little bit to make sure that our investigation is complete. So as we move forward, it actually allows us in that area to go in there and do some more sampling in that area, and also potentially remove some of that inaccessible soil. And with a lot of environmental work, things happen as far as the potential for increased cost, increased time it takes to actually do that. So what we are doing now, we wanted to make sure that we highlight that as well as far as the increased cost to do on that as well. One thing to mention for sure is this is what we are proposing right now as far as our ESD explanation of significant differences. It's not final yet, but we wanted to make sure that we were just putting that out there that this is a process we are going through right now. Yes, we do a lot of work in the field. We do a lot of coordination with contractors and agencies, but we also have to make sure that what is within our authority is being done to the fullest extent possible. And this tool, this explanation of significant differences is a major factor in that and helping us to move forward so that we can get that documentation down key. Next slide. Now, Coolmar Creek. So I know that's a big focus of a lot of what we got going on. We talked about some of the areas south of I-270 and what we have. So I already talked about the Coldwater Creek and how it flows from the St. Louis Airport site onto the Missouri River, 14.2 miles of it. And the kind of some of the history there that I alluded to earlier as far as the remediation sources. We did complete the remediation sources and slabs in 2007 and History area in 2013. And we've been continuously performing the pre-design investigation sampling in the creek corridor and also in the floodplain of those adjacent properties since 2012. We do monitor the creek water twice a year. So the creek water and sediment, we have 11 locations. That's part of our environmental monitoring plan. Every year we do this and make sure that the actual water in the creek is not contaminated. We can definitively say that the water is not contaminated for sure. Once again, the contamination that we are dealing with now is residual contamination that was deposited at one time, and we've been finding it. We have that ability, and that's why our work is so critical in actually getting out there and finding that contamination, doing that sampling, getting those rights of entries to make sure that we can go in there and find it and remove it. Next slide. I already talked about contamination being in some of the spotty areas on the creek. We have already found areas and remediated areas. Much of you on the line probably remember St. Sim Park and the Palm Drive properties, which was a significant accomplishment of this team and the coordination with the property owners and the caretakers of the St. Sim Park in that area there. We've been able to actually get in there and do that in an expeditious manner. So some of that in those spotty areas we've been able to find. But right now, the things that we have found do not pose an immediate risk to human health and the environment. I want to repeat that. It does not pose an immediate risk because a lot of that areas we've been finding, well, all the areas we've been finding are below ground surface and away from populated areas. If we do find something on someone's property, we make sure we notify that person specifically so that they know exactly where it is and they have the ability to put in measures to make sure that they can avoid that area while digging in that area, at least, for sure. We've taken over 28,000 samples already. That is an astronomical number when you consider the amount of samples that the crew has been doing over the years in that 9.6 miles of creek. There's a lot of difficulty there. Kind of alluded to it already with the weather including weather. When sampling crews are going in there and having to deal with any type of inclement weather or even just slippery banks because of that weather and any trees and brush that get in the way out there, if anybody has seen it, it can be a pretty overgrown area out there. I personally did the work when I was with the contractor before I moved over to the Corps of Engineers. It is a challenge for sure. And once again, kudos to everybody, as far as our crew, that actually gets up there and does that work. Next slide. Some of the pictures there of some of the work that happened. We had a couple earlier, but wanted to highlight a couple of others that we have here. You can see on that, I want to look at the one there. I'll start at the top left. You can see the crew actually getting out there with their waders and life jackets on, with their safety equipment to make sure that they can get in there and actually get those sediment samples in that creek. One of the things that they will do is bring along a little boat with them, or a little floating platform with them to make sure that they have their equipment so they can do things things as expeditiously as possible and efficiently as possible. That center picture is what we have as far as what we've done to date, the samples we've taken to date, and some of those areas there where we've been able to actually go in there and find that contamination. Over there on the right, you see some of that brush that the crew has to get through in order to get to a sample location. Just getting to one sample location can really be a chore. Down there at the bottom left, you see one of the crew members actually using a sort of quasi-drill rig almost to get in there. Some of those areas are very rocky, and we want to make sure that if we can get that sample, that we do. And that challenge is definitely sufficient in actually getting in there and getting some of those samples in those rocky areas. Another picture of that brush there in the middle, and then there on the right, some of the times the crew, in order to actually travel up and down those steep banks, they have to make sure that they have some safety measures in place, whether it's steps, handrails, things of that nature, so they can actually get down there safely. Next slide. All right. That concludes the North County St. Louis area there is what we were wanting to cover. Turn it back over to Andrea if you wanted to reiterate anything.
Yes. I wanted to remind everyone that we are monitoring the chat. It is a private chat between attendee and host, and that's me, Andrea Wales, the FUSRAP Public Affairs Specialist. To protect your privacy, please don't include any personally identifiable information such as addresses. If you have specific questions about your property, please email the question and the address to the STL FUSRAP at usace.army.mil, and we will have a contact us message slide at the end. Don't forget to type your name in the chat box if you haven't done it already. So we can get a count of the number of people attending. Include your email address if you would like to be added to the FUSRAP email list. And I wanted to let everybody know that we have a couple of attendees to this meeting that include Missouri State Representative Doug Clemens of District 72, as well as Jennifer Hoskins of Senator Roy Blunt's office. So I'm glad that everyone's here, including the legislators. So let's, I have some questions that I've been getting from the, oh, and we also have, okay. The first question is, who has to abide by safety measures? And how are the safety measures enforced?
Great question, Andrea. And once again, we want to make sure that if you have questions, to get those in the chat so that we can address those at this point in time. So, question as far as who has to abide by those safety measures, we have specific rules that we follow on site as far as our regulations, our Army regulations, that we want to make sure that any safety measures are taken into place. So contractors that are working in that work, they have to abide by it. Any USACE personnel that are going out and actually doing any type of inspections as well have to abide by it. And we have general safety measures too: hard hat, safety shoes and gloves if needed, safety vest if we're going in areas like that. So general safety measures like that are always taken into account any type of work that's going on any of our sites, for sure. And then when it comes to a radiological aspect of it, if anyone is going into an area as far as that is being remediated, they're going to take the safety precautions as well, as far as if they need to put on that personal protective equipment in order to access that site in there.
All OSHA too.
Right, yeah, as far as OSHA, yeah, we're all under OSHA regulations as well.
The question is, how do we know FUSRAP workers from other workers? because they see dump trucks going by and they want to know, well, which one are FUSRAP, that we can be assured that they are taking safety measures.
And that's, you know, another great question as far as any time that we are out in the field, they will generally have some type of a sticker on their door. Or as far as our RA contractors do, they make sure that they have something on their door that identifies them as FUSRAP. But other than that, as far as the hard hats that any of the individuals wear, if a core personnel is out there, they're going to have a core symbol. If one of our contractors is out there, they're going to have their contractor symbol on their hard hat as well.
What testing has occurred around Janna Elementary? Do you have a map showing the sample locations and the results?
Good question. We have sampled around that area for sure, and that's with that area, as well as many of our other areas still under investigation. Part of that process, and timely question, because we do have a fact sheet and we just posted to our website that gives an idea of how long it takes in that process to sample. So that Janna School area is one of those areas that we have sampled. Pertinent parties, we have made sure that have been made aware of these of any preliminary ideas that happen. But as far as the documentation, that is forthcoming, and that will be presented as we get the data, as we do that documentation, as we are able to actually provide that in our reports.
No contamination from Janna School at this time.
No, go. I do want to say we have a couple of subject matter experts in the room that will answer at a point in time, and our health physicist, John Rakins, wanted to make sure that we point out that we have found no contamination around that Janna School area that is within our area that we are actually sampling.
Here's another question about Janna Elementary. So if you could, this is specifically about flooding. Janna Elementary has a large floor drain that has a history of flooding during heavy rain. Does the school have air and radon monitoring by FUSRAP inside the building or outside the building?
Go ahead, Doug.
The school, we do not have any radon monitors in the school. We have no reason to, we have no evidence of any contamination on Janna School property or history of contamination inside the building. So we have no reason to do any air monitoring or radon monitoring in the basement of Janna School itself.
Next question, how many sites are there in total that may be released for future use, that is beneficial use, so far? So how many sites in total may be released in the future that haven't been released so far?
Oh, I see. So yeah, I mean, that is a good question as far as, it's in the hundreds. So there are, what we do is we evaluate each individual parcel as we go down the creek, each individual parcel as we consider a property. So we still have several hundred properties that we have, that we're in the process of sampling, and then that we haven't sampled yet in that additional area that we have beyond that 9.6 miles that we have sampled thus far. And even within that 9.6 miles, that's areas that we are under evaluation and documentation right now to produce that area to actually release.
Let me add a little to that. For North County, the property total is approaching approximately 800 total properties. Now that we have added the Coldwater Creek corridor and floodplain properties adjacent to Coldwater Creek all the way to the Missouri River, that added an additional approximately 700 properties. Okay, so North County record of decision, you know, Coldwater Creek corridor properties is in the magnitude of approximately 90 properties. So I think you had a slide earlier that had a total number of properties released for North County to date, and SLIDs as well. Like the downtown site, there are 37 properties total, 36 vicinity properties, and you have the Mallinckrodt plant, which is subdivided up into many different quote-unquote properties that we have released. So at the downtown site, there are very few properties left that need to be released. Most of them have been released already. The North County site, the number appears large because of the addition of such a large number of properties adjacent to Coldwater Creek.
I don't think it's been mentioned, but I want to make sure that everyone's aware that our presentation here today will be posted on the website so that people can take a look at that at any point in time on our website, as well as the questions that we are answering here now. We're going to provide, as we have done in the past, a document that has the question and has our team's answer to that. Any questions that we do not get to with our time restrictions today, we will still address those via a document on the website.
This question is for Phil. Are the current national issues with rail shipping expected to have an impact on FUSRAP shipping?
That's always a great question, because one of the significant portions of our program is shipping contaminated soil. Right now, we do not see any issues with the actual shipping. We have a dedicated fleet of cars for what we do in our shipping off of contaminated soil. So to answer the question, no, we do not see any specific issues right now with actually being able to ship contaminated soil.
Would additional funding speed things up? Are there funds in either President Biden's bills to help with this?
Yeah, funding is one of the questions we always get, for sure. And it's something we deal with on, as far as our planning aspect and how we plan out what we do. Right now, we have a lot of funds to deal with, to divvy out, to make sure that we are doing things efficiently. Part of the Corps of Engineers, not just with FUSRAP, but what we get in as far as the budget goes, we have to make sure we can execute those funds as well. We have significantly increased our capacity to ship contaminated soil, to take samples and do remediation at the North St. Louis County sites up to this point. So right now, additional money not going to help right now. And one of the things to caveat that as well is we are part of a national program in that a portion of, or we get a portion of the national FUSRAP budget, which is part of a specific appropriation for the Corps of Engineers. We share that funding with other sites, mainly out east, that are managed by the Lakes and Rivers Division and also the North Atlantic Division, as far as other FUSRAP sites that are within the program as well.
Has PFAS, that is, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, contamination been found at SLAPs or in Coldwater Creek? If so, what remediation is planned?
So good question, because I know it's always in the hot button topic as far as emerging contaminants go. Right now, PFAS is not one of our contaminants of concern. So we haven't found it because we don't sample for it. That is a portion of the FUSRAP area. That is a portion, and one of the things I want to say is that that we have said many times, as far as even in public settings, is that we have specific authority to sample for and remediate Manhattan Engineering District and Atomic Energy Commission generated contamination. That does not include any of the contaminants that may be part of another process in that may have entered Coldwater Creek via other means. We only have within our authority the FUSRAP contamination. So just to make sure on that one there.
Can you clarify which street or landmark is nearest to the 9.6 mile point of the creek?
That would be Soho Drive, correct? Yeah, Soho Drive is, if you're familiar with that street, that is the approximately 9 mile marker down Soho Street. Close to Old Jamestown.
Thank you. Question for Phil. Are you able to release any details of approximately how many residential properties north of I-270 may require some level of remediation?
Right now, any type of contamination that we do find, we make sure to coordinate that with the property owner. So we keep that information with that specific property owner so that we maintain their privacy in that manner, and so that they can maintain those any types of control that need be. So right now, that information is with each individual property owner if we have found contamination that does require remediation.
Does FUSRAP still define overgrown areas as inaccessible and therefore a different urgency of removal removal of contamination?
I don't think we have ever identified overgrown areas as inaccessible. One could look at the creek and say that it is overgrown. We take specific measures. The crew goes out there and removes brush if they need to get into an area. Sometimes it's very thick brush to actually get in there and do that remediation. So the answer to that is overgrown areas are accessible.
And then just to add to that, Phil, I think as a program, we're actually being very conservative. If there's any way we can even remotely access previously considered inaccessible soils, we will do it. You know, we're looking at underneath rail lines, rail spurs, riverbeds. We prefer to, you know, remediate that site versus implementing land use control. So just additional information for that question.
Within our specific route authorities.
Yes.
Are the models of low levels of radiation with low health risks based on recent ATSDR, the Agency for Toxic Disease and Substance Registry study, or previous FUSRAP health estimates?
No, those are current FUSRAP risk assessments that we are continuously updating every property, every year. We update our risk assessment methods to be current with EPA slope factors and all sorts of other variables, but they're very similar to ATSDR's technique, I guess, would be one way of calling it.
Is water in the creek ever tested during times of low flow in the creek, or is the water only tested in spring and winter when precipitation is greater?
Yes, we sample the creek at both high flow and low flow, or no flow in some instances, time frames.
What is FUSRAP's history of working with local area road crews and county road crews?
That is a great question. We kind of talked about it in the presentation of working with those road crews and county road crews. Something that, and a tool that we do have in place is our utility support agreement. So not just road crews or local road crews, but any utility that is doing work within our record of decision boundary, we have good relationship with them. They are part of our utility support agreement so that they contact us at somebody in the USAID. We have several points of contact, but we want to make sure to get them to the right person so that we can do an evaluation of that area that they are going into to make sure that they are covered if they need radiological support to go into that area. So we will send out technicians when they're doing work on a road or they're doing work in any utilities to make sure that, that we have that area covered from a health physics support standpoint.
What is the farthest downstream portion of Coldwater Creek to yield contaminants from sampling thus far?
Blackjack Park.
I'm trying to think of the other section. Westminster to Blackjack Park.
You know, Westminster to Blackjack Park section is the furthest we have found. I won't say it's contamination at this point. We have found elevated amounts of thorium above background.
Do they know that in the North County area, what private commercial properties are not granting access for cleanup testing? I don't think that we're at liberty to say that.
No one? No one.
Yes, we know of specific properties that are being a little more difficult to get rights of entry, but yeah, that's not something we're going to put out in a public setting.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
This is a clarification about testing at Janna Elementary. It says that testing at Janna Elementary shows no contamination, or do samples show the area is below remediation guidelines? What about Coldwater Creek land adjacent to the school?
There is contamination in front of Janna's school property along within the creek banks, Coolmar Creek banks or corridor. But that is not considered Janna school property. The question on below remedial goals or contamination, those are the same thing. If there are levels above remedial goals, that is what we define as contamination. If it is below remedial goals, it is not. Based on what I know about the results from Janna school, the property, it's background levels of the COCs we deal with.
This is more on Janna. Since Janna Elementary is a public school, why have details of sampling not already been released to the public? Who are the actors or public officials FUSRAP is communicating with about the public school property?
That's a good point. So as far as the data that is coming from that report is once again goes through that process, and the report is still in production on that. So once the report is final, that information will be released as far as the ability for the public to obtain it. If anybody wants to obtain those types of documents, they have to put in a Freedom of Information request in order to obtain those types of documents. Those are not automatically put out for the public when it comes to specific property areas. They are given to the property owners for their use and their records. And then if there is any areas that are specifically wanted to be addressed as far as that information that we're putting out, you can everyone is always more than welcome to put in a Freedom of Information Act request.
Where can we find the reports that provide the groundwater and surface water data?
Always a great question, and something we always like to point people to our website when we have the opportunity. So specifically to that question, we provide those environmental monitoring data and analysis reports, which we call MDARs for short, on our website that date back to the life of the program, where we take those samples, those water samples, those sediment samples, and groundwater data, and inside that report to show everything that we have done over the years and the evaluation associated with those samples.
Hanley Road was resurfaced a few years ago, as were roads that extend off Patterson Road near the creek. Of these roads, which ones did FUSRAP, I think it's clean, through their channels before road work began? Hanley Road was resurfaced a few years ago, as were roads that extend off Patterson Road near the creek. Of these roads, which ones did FUSRAP clean through their channels before road work began?
Hanley's outside the ROD boundary. Patterson Road, we would have to go back and check our records on that. Really don't know. I couldn't tell you right now.
Is there a document on the FUSRAP webpage that will provide details on sample locations and contaminants found downstream of Old Halls Ferry Road?
Once again, the documents that we produce for individual properties are shared with the property owners, and if there's any additional information that is requested, make sure that Freedom of Information Act gets in there, and we can address that as much as we can.
Soils that are currently not posing a threat, knowing that information gets lost over time, why are we not remediating it now so some person doesn't build a garden over it in 30 years? Soils that are currently not posing a threat, knowing that information gets lost over time, why are we not remediating it now so some person doesn't build a garden over it in 30 years?
That information is never lost. One of the things that we do as an organization that has an environmental mission is part of our record keeping, a strict record keeping portion, and we are going to be here for quite some time. And if there is any contamination that is below ground surface that we can get to, we are going to get to it before we leave, for sure. And so that's as far as we have not lost any information, and we will not lose information. And we share that information, as stated earlier, with those property owners. So that portion, if it were the case and anything changed hands of those property owners, they have that documentation. We still maintain that documentation as well.
If there are any other questions, please put them in the chat, and so one of our subject matter experts can address them. We just got one. Can you please explain when and how background radiation has been set for the North County area? Can you please explain when and how background radiation has been set for the North County area?
We take a random collection of samples off-site, far outside the record of decision boundary, but within the region, and we establish a background distribution of our COCs for North County. There was a part we collected quite a few background samples early on at the beginning of the project in the northwest region of North County, and the St. Louis downtown site. We collected a similar number of random samples north and south of the operable unit, so to speak, to establish the distribution of radionuclides in urban fill. So that is how we establish surface and subsurface soil background concentrations. We do not establish background air concentrations. We do not establish background sediment for our radionuclides, just surface and subsurface soil.
Have any contaminants been found within a half mile of Robbins Grove Drive? Have any contaminants, that is FUSRAP contaminants, been found within 1/2 mile of Robbins Grove Drive?
Can we please get back to you on that and look it up with a map and GIS system?
And if you are more concerned about your, the person who put this question and others like it, if you're concerned about your own property, please use the email address stlfoosrap@usace.army.mil, which is on the screen right now. And you can put your address in there, but we just can't address specifics in this meeting. Let me go over just a reminder about the questions. Only type general questions in the chat box to protect your privacy. Please don't include any personally identifiable information such as addresses. If you have questions specific to your property, as I said before, please email the question and the address to stlfoosrap@usace.army.mil. Also, when you're formulating your questions, please remember that FUSRAP has a cleanup mission, not a medical mission. We don't have the expertise or the authority to address medical questions. Don't forget to type your name in the chat box if you haven't already done so. We'd like to get a count of the number of people attending. Include your email address if you would like to be added to the FUSRAP email list. Okay, here's another question. What was considered off-site for Coldwater Creek, the St. Louis airport site, the Hazelwood interim storage site? Are any of these off-site areas now included in the record of decision or suggested ROD area? What was considered off-site for Coldwater Creek, SLAPS, and HIS? Are any of these off-site areas now included in the ROD or suggested ROD area?
No.
When was background set? What year, please?
We are going to have to look up for the exact year, but the St. Louis downtown site was approximately 1999. The North County background soils were likely shortly after, approximately the year 2000. But we will confirm those years in our record.
On any given day, about how many people are working in North St. Louis County effort on samples, remediation, lab work, and that kind of thing? On any given day, about how many people are working in the North County effort on samples, remediation, lab work, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I would like to say in conjunction with our North County areas and our St. Louis downtown site, because we have some contractors that work at both areas. So when we consider the amount of contractors that we have, it's well over 100.
Yeah. Lab.
In conjunction with USAID's personnel, yes.
Yeah.
You know, if you include us, you probably push 120.
Just a reminder, it's now 7:50 and we have 10 more minutes in this meeting. I wanted to remind you to type any general questions in the chat box. And remember, don't include your address. If you would like to have questions answered specific to your property, please email the question and the address to stlfoosrap@usace.army.mil. If you've forgotten to put your name in the chat box, accompanied by your email address, if you'd like to be on the FUSRAP email list, please do so. Put your name in the chat so we'll know how many people attended.
We'll follow up too with that. The questions about clearance of Hanley roads off Patterson, we'll look back at the record on that.
And perhaps we might be able to see the contact us. I would encourage everyone to take a screenshot of contact us so that you'll have information about the FUSRAP webpage, the St. Louis District website, email, and all the other information that can be useful to you. I see we have another question. Does FUSRAP honor FOIA, Freedom of Information requests, at low or no cost for public nonprofit organizations? If you, there's more to that, and on the St. Louis District website, you can get all the information you need. There's a FOIA section on there, and just look at the bottom of the page of the St. Louis District website, and then you can click on FOIA and get your answers, your questions answered.
But to specifically address the question about costs for nonprofit or educational organizations, there's a waiver process, and an applicant, a requester can ask for a waiver. And if it meets the criteria, then it is offered at no cost. There's also page limitations. There are certain requests that can be offered at no cost or low cost.
What's your goal for finishing the North County cleanup?
Goal?
Oh, North County cleanup right now, we have, you know, timely question. We've just recently completed kind of a schedule and risk assessment update that shows us actually going out for until 2038.
And what's the projection date of remediation complete for the cleanup of Coldwater Creek?
Same thing, it's tied to that, 2038.
Would additional funding, I think that you answered this question about additional funding speeding things up.
Yeah, it was from Harvey.
Yes.
Did he not get the answer earlier?
I don't know. Maybe he stepped away from his computer.
So asked again, and we have time. We have 6 minutes left, so we'll go ahead. And as far as speeding things up, in addition to what I said earlier, things have sped up for sure from where they were several years ago as far as our ability to receive, obligate, and execute on those funds that we receive from the national program. So right now we're kind of tapped out with our loadout area and our ability of our crews. And it is in the president's budget that you can see online, that accessible information to everyone, that what we have received for the North County vicinity properties over the past couple of years in around $30 million for that specific project.
How do we identify dump trucks transporting soil from FUSRAP areas to ensure they are covered when delivering soil to the rail yard? How do we identify dump trucks transporting soil from FUSRAP areas to ensure they are covered when delivering soil to the rail yard? I believe this person probably also stepped away because I believe that you covered it.
No, I mean, if a person were to monitor our remediation, they would they would see everything that we talked about in the presentation. They would see that. So in order for them to actually know, they would have to be there at site. And of course, that is with anyone's ability to just watch and see what's going on. I would welcome that because we take all kinds of precautions that are in that place. So just to make sure that portion is covered for sure. I step back. We don't encourage anyone to just go out and just observe contractors. Rest assured that portion is happening, and so.
Yeah, I would say we have a quality assurance plan in place that provides oversight of our contractors. There is no distinguishable marking that we require on all of our contractors' haul vehicles of waste or non-waste. They typically have a contracting sticker on their trucks, and sometimes they add a FUSRAP logo, sometimes they don't. It's not something that we require. So the short answer to your question is there is no way for the public to distinguish our haul trucks versus another construction operation. But we do have a quality assurance plan in place that provides oversight that assures that all material is covered and shipped and transported under proper Department of Transportation regulations.
In the Coldwater Creek corridor, what level floodplain is used as a limit for sampling? Roughly how far is that from Coldwater Creek?
So our sampling for Coldwater Creek, the floodplain is the 10-year floodplain, which we have mapped out. And that, for a lot of areas, that follows the 100-year floodplain. It is not much different than the 100-year floodplain when you actually map it out and look at it on a map.
Will the entire administrative record be available on the USACE website in the electronic reading room? Do you have a projected date for that? Yes. I'm currently working, I'm Andrea Wales, in case you tuned in late. I'm currently working on the electronic reading room. So far it has the Iowa Army Ammunition Plant administrative record, and it has both SLID's, St. Louis Downtown Site administrative records, and it has the bulk of the North St. Louis County administrative record. So I am currently working on that. It's very close to completion, and I hope that it'll be done next week. I have a question. I don't understand what tapped out means. Will additional funding speed things up? Please answer yes or no.
No.
Can you provide, next question, can you provide details of where the Blackjack Park contaminants were found?
In this setting, no, not right now. There's too many details to go over. We wouldn't have enough time to do that right now. Very preliminary.
We'll take their name down and respond back to them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, all of these are within the Coldwater Creek corridor, so within the creek banks, top of bank to top of bank.
A question and answer document on the FUSRAP webpage for everyone to take a look at. Okay. I'm afraid that we're at 8 o'clock, and I'd like to turn it over to Phil Mosier for his closing remarks.
Right, thanks, Andrea. And as you said, any questions that we didn't get to, we're going to be posting those on the website. Right now, I'm going to go ahead, while the Colonel is still on the line, go ahead and turn it over to the Colonel.
Hey, thanks, Phil and Andrea, for helping to moderate, but really to all the folks on the team that covered all the material tonight. Thank you very much. And really to everyone that joined. I was really impressed. I was kind of tracking and monitoring the number of people that hung out the entire time, and a lot of great detailed questions there. And so really do appreciate this chance to engage, and then we'll continue this dialogue to make sure that any questions you have are answered. And so I just really want to wrap it up by saying thank you again. And again, this is a great place to live, great place to work. Thanks to Phil and your team.
For sure, thanks for that, sir, as well. Second that, we really appreciate the opportunity to engage with everyone. And once again, feel free to visit our website. We encourage you to visit our website at any point in time. There's a bevy of information on there for anyone to get through. If you do have any other specific questions, there's a lot of things that can be answered on there. If you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks, everybody, and good night.